The night Cole Rourke rode through Ashford Hills, the rain came down like something had finally given up, trying to hold itself together. His Harley split the darkness at 70 miles an hour. No headlights behind him, no destination ahead. Just the engine, just the cold, just the specific kind of silence that follows a man who has buried too many people to still believe in luck. He wasn't supposed to stop. He never stopped anymore. Stopping meant seeing things, feeling things. And Cole Rourke had spent 6 years making sure he never did either. But at the corner of Whitmore and Elgin, where the streetlight flickered like it was losing a fight with the dark, he saw something that broke every rule he'd ever written for himself. 2 little girls, alone, drowning in the storm. Before this story goes any further, if you are watching this right now, wherever you are in the world, this is your moment. Hit that subscribe button. Turn on notifications. Because what happens to Cole, to those 2 little girls, and to the woman who changed everything, you do not want to find out from someone else's summary. Drop a comment below and tell me what city, what country you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Now, let's go back to that rain-soaked corner. The Harley sounded wrong on these streets. That was the first thing. The engine, a 2003 Road King that Cole had rebuilt twice with his own hands, had a particular growl, the kind that belonged to highways and industrial lots, and the back roads behind truck stops where nobody asked questions. It did not belong on Whitmore Avenue, where every driveway held a Range Rover, and every lawn was edged with the kind of precision that announced money loudly and without apology. Cole knew it. The engine knew it. And the rain, coming down in cold gray sheets against the asphalt, seemed to agree. He'd taken the wrong exit. That was the simple explanation. He'd been riding for 3 hours with no particular destination, the way he rode most nights when the apartment on Garfield Street became too quiet and the walls started doing what walls do when a man lives alone too long. They talked, not with words, with the particular silence that remembered what used to fill them. He'd taken exit 14 instead of 11, found himself in a neighborhood built for people who made different choices than he had, and told himself he'd cut through and get back on the highway and keep moving until the thinking stopped. He was almost through. Almost. The girls were at the intersection of Whitmore and Elgin, beneath a pink umbrella that had surrendered to the storm. One spoke collapsed inward. The fabric hung sideways, doing nothing. The older girl, maybe 7, maybe 8, dark hair plastered to her face, had her arm around the smaller one, her body curved like a shield. The smaller one was crying without sound, the way children cry when they've already cried past the point of making noise. She was holding a stuffed rabbit to her chest. Yellow. Missing one button eye. Cole saw all of this in the 2 seconds it took his headlight to sweep across them as he came around the curve. He kept riding, for 11 seconds. He counted them later. 11 seconds of wet road and the smell of exhaust and the very reasonable argument that this was not his problem, that he was the wrong kind of person to help, that showing up at someone's door at 10:15 at night looking the way he looked, 6'2", 210, leather jacket with an Iron Shepherd patch on the back, both arms sleeved in ink from wrist to collarbone, would do more harm than good. 11 seconds of being correct. Then the smaller girl's voice cut through the engine noise. He shouldn't have been able to hear it. The rain was too loud. The Harley was too loud. But he heard it the way you sometimes hear things that aren't meant for you to hear, the way certain sounds travel distances they have no right to travel. I'm cold. Cole put both boots down and stopped the bike in the middle of the road. He sat there for a moment. The rain hit the back of his neck, the gap between his collar and his helmet. He'd left the helmet at home tonight, which was stupid, but he hadn't expected to care much about his head when he left. His jaw tightened, his hands stayed on the grips. He was having the argument with himself that he always lost, the one where he explained to the part of himself that still responded to things why that part needed to shut up and let him ride. He turned the bike around. The girls watched him come back with the specific stillness of children who have already learned that adults in motion are not always coming toward them with good intentions. The older one stepped slightly in front of the smaller one, protective. Cole saw it and felt something in his chest move in a direction he didn't have a name for. He cut the engine 20 feet away. Didn't want to roll up on them running. He pulled off his gloves, tucked them in his jacket pocket, and walked toward them the way you walk toward a frightened animal. Slow, no sudden angles, hands where they could be seen. "You two lost?" he said. His voice came out rougher than intended. 6 years of too much whiskey and too many cigarettes and too few conversations had done things to his vocal cords that couldn't be undone. The older girl didn't answer immediately. She looked at him the way a child looks at something they've been warned about, taking in the tattoos, the patch, the size of him. The rain ran down her face. Her lips were turning the particular bluish gray of a child who had been cold for too long. "Our driver didn't come," she finally said. "Driver. We had a play date. Mrs. Pennington's driver was supposed to take us home, but he didn't come and Mrs. Pennington's phone isn't working." Cole looked up and down the street, empty. The nearest house with lights on was 3 blocks east. He looked back at the girls. "Where's home?" The older girl pointed north. "Ashwood Drive, the big house with the iron gate." He knew the street. Half-mile up. He also knew that standing here debating logistics while a small child turned blue was not a debate he was willing to have with himself. He stripped off his jacket, the leather one, the Iron Shepherd one, $45 of wear and 20 years of history, and crouched down to the smaller girl's level. She looked at him with wide, reddened eyes, still clutching the rabbit. "What's your name?" he asked her. "Lily," she whispered. "Lily. This jacket is going to be too big for you, but it's going to keep the rain off. Okay?" She looked at the jacket, looked at him. Then she held out the rabbit, offering it the way children offer their most important things when they decide someone can be trusted. Cole didn't know what to do with that. He hadn't been trusted with anything important in a long time. He took the rabbit carefully, held it while he wrapped the jacket around Lily's shoulders. It swallowed her completely. She disappeared into it like something small taking shelter in something built for storms. He tucked the collar up around her ears. The older girl was watching all of this. "I'm Mara," she said when he stood back up. "Cole, you have a motorcycle." "Yeah." "You're going to take us home?" He looked at the Harley, looked at the two of them. "You know how to hold on?" Mara considered this seriously. "We can learn fast." Something almost happened to his face. He kept it in check. He walked them to the bike, put Lily in front of him where he could wrap one arm around her, put Mara behind, showed her where to put her hands, told her to keep her feet on the pegs and lean with him, not against him. The whole thing was improvised and mildly dangerous and completely necessary. He started the engine low and slow and kept it there. The Harley rolling at 20 miles an hour through the rain, Lily's small body pressed against his chest, his jacket enormous around her, the stuffed rabbit tucked inside so only its one remaining button eye was visible. It took 4 minutes to reach Ashwood Drive. The gate was iron, as advertised, and beyond it sat a house that had stopped trying to be called a house and simply become an estate. 3 stories. Limestone facade. The kind of architectural statement that said the people inside it had been making decisions at a certain altitude for a very long time. The lights were on downstairs. Cole could see someone moving behind the tall windows of what looked like a kitchen or a sitting room, moving the way people move when they're worried. He stopped the bike at the gate. There was an intercom panel. Lily reached out from inside his jacket and pressed the button with the confidence of a child who had pressed it 10,000 times. A voice came through immediately. A woman's voice, tight with barely managed panic. "Lily? Mara? Is that you?" "It's us, Mommy," Mara said. "A man brought us home." A pause. Not long. Maybe 3 seconds. The kind of pause that contains a very specific kind of recalibration. "What man?" "His name is Cole. He has a motorcycle and tattoos. He gave Lily his jacket." Another pause. The gate buzzed and began to swing open. Cole rode the Harley up the gravel drive slowly. The front door opened before he reached it. A woman came down the stone steps, not running because she was the kind of woman who had trained herself not to run, but moving at the fastest pace that still allowed her to maintain the appearance of control. She was in a white silk blouse and dark trousers. Dark hair, wet now from the rain, pulled half loose from whatever it had been that morning. She carried herself like someone used to being the most composed person in any room, but the composure was cracking at the edges in the specific way it cracks when the thing you feared most almost happened. She reached the girls and pulled them both against her without breaking stride, one arm around each, her eyes closing for 1 second, just one, before they opened again and found Cole. I was still on the bike, had not gotten off. There was a version of this where he handed over the girls and left, and he had been planning to execute that version. But her eyes stopped him. Not because they were what he expected. He expected relief, maybe suspicion, maybe the particular look wealthy women give dangerous-looking men who show up uninvited in their driveways. He'd seen that look before. He knew exactly what it felt like to be assessed and found wanting before anyone had spoken a word. That was not what he saw. What he saw was recognition, fast and unwilling, the kind of recognition a person has before they can stop themselves, the kind that shows up in the eyes before the brain can intervene and remind the rest of the face to stay neutral. Her lips parted slightly. Her grip tightened on the girl's. Cole had spent 20 years reading rooms and people and the specific body language of situations about to go sideways, and what he read on her face in that half-second was not suspicion. It was something she hadn't expected to feel. He didn't know her. He was almost certain he didn't know her. But almost certain and certain were not the same thing, and the part of his life that he couldn't always access clearly. The years before the tragedy, before the guilt, before the road became his only answer to anything, had gaps in it that he'd stopped trying to fill. "Thank you," she said. Her voice was controlled, careful. "For bringing them home." "They were cold," he said, which was not an answer, but he didn't have another one. Lily looked up from inside his jacket. She'd been warm for 4 minutes, and that seemed to have restored something fundamental in her. She looked at Cole with the particular directness of a 5-year-old who has not yet learned to soften observations. "Mommy," she said, "is this my daddy?" The rain kept falling. The woman's face did something complicated that Cole couldn't name. And the world, the cold, wet, reasonable world that had been making perfect sense 30 minutes ago, stopped making sense entirely. Cole said nothing. Couldn't. The word daddy had hit him somewhere behind the sternum and lodged there like a piece of shrapnel, the kind that doesn't hurt immediately, but that you become aware of the instant it moves. The woman, her name was Vivian, though he didn't know that yet, though the name was already somewhere in the locked rooms of his memory, looked at her daughter with an expression that was attempting to be gentle and failing because her hands were shaking. "Lily, sweetheart, he looks like the picture," Lily said, with the absolute certainty of a child who has studied something long and carefully and arrived at a conclusion. "The one in your drawer, the one you look at when you think we're sleeping." The silence after that was the loudest thing Cole had heard in years. He looked at Vivian. She looked at him. The rain came down between them like a curtain neither of them knew how to cross. And in that moment, with his jacket around a child who might be his daughter, and his heart doing something it hadn't done since before he understood what loss meant, Cole Rourke understood one thing with perfect, terrible clarity. Whatever he had been riding away from for 6 years had just found him. And it had his eyes. Mara broke the silence the way children break silences, without strategy, without hesitation, with the simple physics of a truth that needs to be spoken. "She asks about him sometimes," Mara told Cole, as if completing an important piece of information he'd been waiting for. "She never says who, but she gets sad after." Vivian made a sound that wasn't quite a word. Her hand moved to Mara's shoulder. Cole had made a decision years ago about what kind of man he was. He'd made it after the accident, after Danny, when the guilt had settled into his bones and the Brotherhood had tried to pull him back, and he'd walked away from every hand that reached for him. He'd made it on 100 different nights, on 100 different roads. He had the decision memorized. It was simple, clean. It kept him from hurting anyone else. The decision was, don't stay. He looked at Lily, still wrapped in his jacket, one-eyed rabbit tucked against her chest, looking at him with total, undefended trust. He looked at Mara, who looked back with the careful watchfulness of a child who has learned to read rooms because she had to. He looked at Vivian, who was looking at a point slightly past his shoulder with the expression of someone who has spent years doing something very difficult alone and is running out of the particular kind of strength it takes. Cole reached into his jacket pocket. Lily shifted slightly to let him, and took out a card. It was from the shop. Rourke's Iron and Service, motorcycle repair and custom work. His number was on it. He'd had the cards made 3 years ago to seem legitimate to insurance adjusters, and had never felt legitimate enough to hand them to anyone else. He held it out to Vivian. She looked at it, looked at him. "In case the girls need anything," he said, "or in case you have questions." It was the most carefully constructed sentence he had assembled in years. She took the card. Her fingers were cold when they brushed his. She pulled back immediately, but not before he felt it. the slight, involuntary intake of breath, barely audible over the rain. He filed it away somewhere he wasn't ready to look at yet. He started the Harley. Lily's small voice cut through the engine noise one more time. "You forgot your jacket." Cole looked at the massive leather jacket wrapped around the tiny girl. The iron shepherd patch. 20 years of road and memory and brotherhood and loss. The jacket he'd been buried in emotionally every night since he left everything behind. "Keep it," he said. "It's a better fit." He rode out the gate before anyone could say anything else. 3 blocks north, in the dark, in the rain, on a road built for people who had never made his particular mistakes, Cole Rourke pulled over and sat with the engine running and his hands on the grips and something happening in his chest that he had no framework for managing. A photograph. In a drawer. A woman who looked at it when she thought her children weren't watching. A little girl with his eyes. He'd seen it, hadn't he? In the dark and the rain, in a fraction of a second, in the impossible clear certainty of a 5-year-old's announcement, she had his eyes. Cole had left a lot of places. He'd left the brotherhood. He'd left the shop to a partner. He'd left Garfield Street and come back and left again. He'd left people who loved him because it was the only protection he knew how to offer. He told himself he was going to leave this too. He told himself that with complete conviction. He believed it for exactly 47 minutes, which was how long it took him to get back to the apartment, sit down on the edge of his bed, and find something on the nightstand he hadn't put there. A small stuffed rabbit with one button eye sitting next to his keys. He didn't remember putting it in his pocket. He didn't remember Lily pressing it into his jacket during the ride. But there it was. And somewhere on Ashwood Drive, behind an iron gate, in a limestone house lit up against the storm, a 5-year-old girl was probably looking for it, which meant he had a reason to go back, which was exactly the kind of reason he had always known would destroy him. Cole Rourke lay back on his bed, stared at the ceiling, and for the first time in 6 years, he didn't reach for the bottle on the floor beside the nightstand. He didn't know yet what the photograph in the drawer looked like. He didn't know yet what Vivian Ashford knew and had chosen not to say. He didn't know that 3 miles across the city, at that exact moment, a man in an expensive car was watching the security feed from Ashwood Drive's exterior cameras, watching Cole's Harley roll up the gravel drive, watching Cole hand over the card, watching the gate close, and making a phone call that would change everything. He didn't know any of that yet. All he knew was that a child had trusted him with her most important thing, and he had no idea how to be worthy of that. The rabbit sat on the nightstand until 4 in the morning. Cole didn't sleep. He lay on top of the covers in his jeans and his flannel shirt, boots still on, staring at the water stain on the ceiling that looked like nothing and everything depending on how long you looked at it. The apartment on Garfield Street was 1,100 square feet of deliberate emptiness. No photographs, no decorations. A bed, a couch, a work table covered in engine parts, a kitchen that saw coffee, and not much else. He'd built the space to contain exactly one person and exactly 0 expectations, and for 3 years it had done its job. The rabbit looked at him with its one button eye. He got up at 4:15, made coffee he didn't drink, and stood at the window watching the street below where the rain had thinned to a gray mist, and the sodium lights made everything the color of old photographs. A truck rolled past. A dog somewhere barked twice and stopped. The city at 4 in the morning was a different city than the one that ran during daylight. Smaller, quieter, honest in a way cities couldn't afford to be when people were watching. Cole picked up the rabbit, turned it over in his hands. It was worn in the specific way of something that had been loved past the point of structural integrity. The seams at the ears were hand-stitched with thread that didn't quite match, the kind of repair a mother makes at 2 in the morning when her child can't sleep without it. He set it back down. He did not let himself think about the photograph in the drawer. He thought about it constantly. At 6:30 he was already at the shop. Works Iron and Service occupied the ground floor of a converted warehouse on Delman Street, 3 blocks from the elevated train and directly below the flight path of planes coming into the regional airport, which meant the building vibrated slightly every 9 minutes, and the conversation inside it was regularly interrupted by the sound of something large overhead. Cole had leased the space 4 years ago, bought out his first partner 18 months later when the man's drinking became his problem, and then everyone's problem, and since then had run it alone in the way that certain people run things alone, efficiently, joylessly, with total competence and no particular desire to expand. The shop was his. That was what mattered. The work was his. The noise, and the grease, and the specific satisfaction of a broken thing made functional, that was his. Marcus was already there when Cole arrived. Marcus Webb was 53 years old, built like a man who had done hard physical labor since before it was a lifestyle choice, and was the only person Cole allowed in the shop on a consistent basis without an appointment or an invoice. He'd been an iron shepherd for 22 years, had the road rash scars on his left forearm to prove the night that should have killed him didn't, and had a talent for appearing wherever Cole was without ever being asked to come. He was sitting on an upturned milk crate outside the roll-up door with a coffee in each hand, which meant he already knew something. Cole took the offered cup without commenting on it. "Heard you were out riding last night," Marcus said. "Hear a lot of things." "Whitmore and Elgin." Marcus sipped his coffee, looked at the street. "That's a long way off your usual route." Cole unlocked the roll-up door, got it moving. The metal complained along its track. Inside, 3 bikes in various states of disassembly waited in the light that came through the high industrial windows, patient and broken. He walked to the nearest, a '98 Sportster whose owner had buried a valve, and picked up where he'd left off yesterday without answering. Marcus followed him in, sat on a stool, did not pick up a tool, which meant this was not a work conversation. "2 little girls," Marcus said. "Yeah. You brought them home. They were cold." "Cole. Don't." Marcus was quiet for a moment. A plane passed overhead, the ceiling vibrated. The fluorescent lights in the back corner flickered in their customary way. When the noise faded, Marcus set his coffee down on the workbench with the deliberateness of a man setting down something he intends to pick up again. "Harlan called me last night," he said. Cole's hands didn't stop moving on the Sportster's engine, but something in his shoulders changed, the kind of change that isn't visible so much as felt, the way a drop in barometric pressure is felt before it's understood. Harlan Cade. The name landed the way names land when they carry the weight of things left unfinished. "What does Harlan want?" Cole said. It wasn't a question. "He wants a meeting. He knows where the shop is. He wants a full meeting. The table." Marcus paused. "Everyone." Cole set down the wrench. He looked at his hands, the knuckles, the grease already worked into the skin, the ink that started at his wrists, and told the story of a life he'd partially walked away from. He picked the wrench back up. "Tell him I'm busy." "Cole?" He's been patient. Harlan doesn't know what patience is. He knows what waiting looks like when it's strategic. Maybe. But there's a difference between Harlan wanting something and the Brotherhood needing something. This is the second one. Marcus leaned forward, elbows on his knees. 3 months ago, someone started buying up debt on Iron Shepherd-affiliated businesses. Not just here. Delman Street, yeah, but also Krause's place in Mill Haven, the garage up on Route 9, Tommy Park's towing operation. Somebody is building a very deliberate kind of pressure, Cole. Harlan thinks it connects to something bigger. Cole looked up. What does he think it connects to? Marcus met his eyes. He thinks it connects to Ashwood Drive. The shop was quiet except for the drip of something somewhere and the distant sound of the elevated train. Cole carefully put the wrench down, straightened up, looked at Marcus with the expression he used when he needed to understand exactly what was being said before deciding how to respond. "Explain that," he said. "The estate on Ashwood Drive. Ashford Holdings. Vivian Ashford. Harlan's been watching that property for 6 weeks. Not her. The people circling her. There's a man named Garrett Wells who has been quietly acquiring influence in this city in a way that doesn't make the papers but that Harlan has been tracking for 2 years. Real estate, debt, municipal contracts. He's building something. And Vivian Ashford owns the one piece of property that blocks his development corridor from Mill Haven all the way to the interstate." Cole stood very still. "What happened last night," Marcus said carefully, "wasn't random. Those girls were at a house 3 blocks from where Wells's driver was supposed to be. The same driver who didn't show up. Harlan wants to know if the girls not having a ride home was a coincidence." The silence stretched long enough to become something with weight. "He was watching the security feed," Cole said. "By the time Harlan saw the footage, it was already done. You were already riding away." Marcus paused. "But Wells's people saw it too, Cole. Whatever you are to those girls, to that woman, Wells now knows your face." Cole walked to the back of the shop. There was a sink there, industrial, the kind with a foot pedal. He ran cold water over his hands, watched the first layer of grease cut loose. He did this slowly, methodically, because doing things slowly and methodically was how he kept the inside of his skull from becoming uninhabitable. He had spent 6 years being nobody to everybody. That was the arrangement. That was the entire architecture of the life he'd built on Garfield Street, at this shop, on these roads. Nobody knew him well enough to use him. Nobody was close enough to get hurt. In one night, he had handed that architecture a match. He turned off the water, dried his hands, walked back. "I'll talk to Harlan," he said. Marcus nodded, said nothing. "But I set the terms. My table. My time." Cole picked up the wrench again. "And Marcus, the girls are not part of this. Whatever Harlan thinks he's building, they are not pieces on his board. I need you to be clear with him about that before I walk in." Marcus looked at him for a long moment with the look of a man who has known another man long enough to read the thing underneath the thing being said. 6 years, Marcus said quietly. "Nothing touched you. Not once." Cole didn't answer. "One night," Marcus said. "One cold street. Don't make it what it isn't. I'm not making it anything." Marcus stood, finished his coffee, set the cup down. "I'm just saying I haven't seen that look on your face since before Danny." Cole's jaw tightened. The name hit where names like that always hit. Low, internal, the kind of impact that doesn't make a sound. Danny Rourke, his younger brother. Dead 3 years and still capable of arriving in conversation like a knife through a wall. "Get out of my shop," Cole said, but without heat. Almost gently. Marcus went. Cole stood in the empty shop for a while with his hands on the Sportster's engine and his eyes not seeing the engine at all. He drove to Ashwood Drive at 10 o'clock. He told himself it was to return the rabbit. That was the totality of the plan. Return the rabbit, fulfill the obligation, get back in the wind. He put the stuffed animal in the inside pocket of his backup jacket, an older one, plain black, no patch, and rode north through traffic that was still moving with the post-rain caution of a city not quite sure the storm was done. The gate at Ashwood Drive opened before he reached the intercom. She was expecting him, or she'd been watching. He rode up the gravel drive and killed the engine and got off the bike and stood for a moment just looking at the house in daylight, which made it different. Less fortress, more architecture. Still enormous, the kind of enormous that didn't announce itself but that you understood in the body, the way you understand scale in the presence of certain mountains. But the morning light softened the limestone, and the front garden, still wet from last night, had the specific green of things recently washed. The front door opened. Vivian Ashford stood in the doorway in a dark gray sweater and jeans and bare feet on the stone step, which struck Cole as an interesting choice for a woman who had seemed, last night, to be constructed entirely from controlled surfaces. The bare feet changed something, made her real in a way the silk blouse hadn't. She looked at him for a moment, then at the bike, then back at him. "I wasn't sure you'd come back," she said. "The girls left something." He produced the rabbit. Vivian looked at it. Something crossed her face. Relief, and something older than relief. Something that had been sitting behind her eyes for a long time. "Lily cried for an hour," she said. "I told her you might bring it back." She was right. A pause. A bird moved in the wet garden. A car passed on the street beyond the gate. "Come inside," Vivian said. "I won't stay." "I know." A beat. "Come inside anyway. There's coffee, and I think we need to say certain things out loud before they get any heavier." Cole looked at her. She held his eyes. She didn't flinch, which he noted. A lot of people flinched when he held eye contact. Not from fear exactly, but from the particular discomfort of being looked at too directly by someone whose face didn't offer the usual social reassurances. Vivian Ashford did not flinch. She looked back with the steadiness of someone who has faced down difficult things on a regular basis and made a policy of not blinking. He followed her inside. The interior of the house was not what he expected. He'd expected the kind of cold, curated perfection that wealthy houses often performed, everything positioned to demonstrate taste and repel intimacy. What he found instead was a house that had been lived in hard by children, which meant coats on the floor near the door, and a drawing taped crookedly to the wall of the entrance hall, and a smell of coffee, and something baked that morning, and underneath all of it, the specific chaos of a family in motion. There were photographs on the hall table, not formal portraits, candid shots in simple frames, the girls at various ages, at a beach, in a park, in what looked like this kitchen. Vivian in some of them, always slightly turned from the camera, the way people stand when they're more comfortable behind the lens than in front of it. No man in any of the photographs. Cole noticed that, kept noticing it as she led him through to the kitchen. The kitchen was large and warm and had the evidence of a real morning in it. 2 small plates with toast crumbs, a glass of orange juice half finished, a homework sheet on the far end of the counter with a crayon drawing that appeared to be either a horse or a large dog. The girls were not present. A housekeeper moved quietly somewhere deeper in the house. Vivian poured coffee, set a mug in front of him without asking how he took it. He noticed she poured it black, the way he would have asked for it. He sat at the kitchen island. She stood on the other side of it, both hands wrapped around her own mug, and looked at him with the expression of a woman about to do something she'd been rehearsing for a long time. "Her name is Lily," Vivian said. "She'll be 6 in March. Mara is 8. They have different fathers." Cole said nothing, waited. Lily's father, her biological father, I met him at an industry conference in Portland 7 years ago. We weren't together. It was... She stopped, recalibrated, started again with the precision of someone who has learned that sanitized versions of the truth have a short shelf life. It was 2 nights. We were honest with each other about what it was. And then I came home, and 6 weeks later I found out I was pregnant, and the number I had for him went straight to voicemail and stayed there. The coffee was good. He didn't know why he noticed that. He put the mug down. "What was his name?" Cole said. Not what he meant to say, but the one that came out. Vivian looked at him for a long moment. "He told me his name was Cole," she said. "He told me he worked with motorcycles. He had hands like yours, and an iron shepherd tattoo inside the left wrist." She looked at his left wrist, where exactly that tattoo lived, and Cole felt the ground shift in a way that was not metaphorical. The stool, the floor, the entire building seemed for a moment to tilt on an axis he hadn't known existed. I assumed he'd given me a false name. Men do. I didn't look very hard. I had Mara already. I had a company to run. I told myself she didn't need him if he didn't want to be found. Cole's hands were flat on the counter. He was looking at them. 7 years ago, Portland. He'd been at the Pacific Distributors Conference, running parts logistics for the Brotherhood's legitimate supply chain. He'd been drinking more than he should have, in the specific post-Danny grief that had not yet hardened into the discipline of sobriety, and there had been a woman across a hotel bar who looked at him without the fear or the performance that women usually offered, and they had talked for 3 hours, and he had not given her his last name because he was not yet the person who gave people his last name, and he had left before she woke up because he was very much already the person who left before anyone woke up. He remembered her. He had tried, over the years, not to. "Vivian," he said. "I know," she said. They were quiet. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere upstairs, one of the girls said something and the other one laughed. "I need to ask you something," Cole said. His voice was level. He was working to keep it level. "And I need you to tell me the exact truth." "All right." "Did you know? Last night, when I was at the gate." Vivian set her mug down. She looked at him without looking away. "I suspected. When Mara said your name. And when I saw the patch." She paused. "I didn't know for certain, but yes, some part of me knew. And you let me leave. I didn't know how to..." She stopped. Her jaw tightened. "You're right. I let you leave." Cole stood up from the stool. He walked to the kitchen window and looked out at the back garden, which was large and had a swing set at the far end, damp with last night's rain. The swings moved slightly in the morning wind. He stood at the window for a long time. "I need a paternity test," he said. "Yes." "Soon." "Yes." "And until we have results..." He stopped. Something was moving in his chest like machinery that had been switched on after years of disuse, grinding and uncertain and loud. "I want to see them. The girls. If you're the first person who's asked," Vivian said. There was nothing accusatory in it. It was just a fact stated the way facts are stated when they have been carried alone for a very long time. He turned from the window. And then the front door opened. Not the housekeeper. Not the girls. The sound of it was different, heavy, purposeful, the entry of someone who was not accustomed to knocking and had decided today was not the day to start. Vivian's expression shifted in a way that told Cole exactly what he needed to know before the man appeared in the kitchen doorway. He was maybe 50, silver-haired, wearing a suit that cost more than Cole made in a month, with the relaxed authority of someone for whom other people's spaces are always temporarily his. He looked at Vivian with the particular smile of a man who has been managing a woman's situation for so long he has forgotten she didn't ask him to. He looked at Cole with the briefer, sharper assessment of a man cataloging a complication. "Vivian," he said, "I heard you had some excitement last night." His eyes stayed on Cole. "I didn't realize you had company." "Garrett," Vivian said, and the single word contained 7 different things, none of them welcome. "Garrett Wells." Cole kept his face neutral. His hands, hanging at his sides, were very still. "I was just leaving," Cole said. He looked at Vivian. "I'll be in touch." She nodded. One small movement, tight with things she couldn't say in this room. Cole walked toward the doorway. Wells did not move entirely out of his path. A small, deliberate decision, the kind that tests whether a man will redirect or push through. Cole walked through the space Wells occupied as if the man were furniture, not aggressively, not slowly, just with the absolute certainty of a person for whom other people's power plays are below the threshold of acknowledgement. He felt Wells's eyes on his back the entire length of the hallway. He was almost to the front door when Lily appeared at the top of the stairs in her pajamas, hair wild, one sock on and one sock off, in the grip of a 5-year-old's total indifference to the tension filling the house. She saw him. She sat down on the top step and regarded him with her full attention. "Did you bring Rabbit?" she asked. He reached into his jacket, held up the stuffed animal. Lily's face did the thing children's faces do when the thing they feared is not true. Total, undefended relief, the kind adults spend a lifetime learning to suppress. "Come up and give it to me," she said. "Another time," Cole said. "I've got to go." "Why?" "Work." She considered this. "Will you come back?" Cole looked at this child. This small, sleepy, completely certain child in her one sock at the top of the stairs, in a house he had no business being in, asking him a question he had no business answering with the truth. "Yeah," he said, "I'll come back." He left before Wells could see his face. He rode 6 blocks and then pulled over on a side street behind a dry cleaner and sat on the Harley with the engine off and his helmet sitting on the tank, and he called Marcus. Marcus picked up on the second ring. "Tell Harlan," Cole said without preamble. "Tell him I'll be at the table tonight." "What changed?" Cole looked at the street. A woman walked past with a grocery bag. A kid on a bike cut the corner too fast and corrected. The city moved around him the way it always did, indifferent and continuous and completely unaware of what had just been detonated inside one man's chest. "Garrett Wells was at the Ashford house," Cole said. "He has a key." Silence on the line. "Cole, he walked in like he owned the place, Marcus, and the way Vivian looked at him." Cole stopped, organized the thought. It wasn't fear of him. It was fear of what he was capable of doing. There's a difference. "There is," Marcus agreed. His voice had changed, lower, more careful. "I need to know what Harlan knows about Wells's connection to that house. All of it. I need to know if those girls are—" He stopped again. The word stuck. "If they're what?" Marcus asked quietly. "If they're in danger," Cole said. "Not as leverage. Not as pieces on anybody's board. If those specific children are in actual danger." The silence that followed was the kind that Marcus used when the answer was yes, but he wanted to verify the source before saying it. "Be at the shop at 9, Marcus said finally. "I'll make sure Harlan is there." Cole hung up. He sat for another minute. Then he picked up the helmet, put it on. He'd grabbed it on the way out this morning, some instinct toward self-preservation he hadn't felt in years, and started the bike. The Iron Shepherds had a table. Cole had built it. He'd bought the oak at a salvage yard and put it together in the back of the Delman Street shop 12 years ago, when the Brotherhood was 8 men and a set of shared principles, and the absolute belief that the world had enough predators and needed a different kind of force. He had walked away from that table. Tonight, he was walking back. And somewhere in the city, Garrett Wells was sitting in a limestone house with a key he hadn't been given by the woman who lived there, making calculations that involved two little girls who had no idea they were being calculated about. Cole arrived at the shop at 8:40. Harlan Cade's bike was already in the lot. So were four others. Road Kings, a Dyna, a Softail with custom pipes that Cole had built himself 3 years ago, and handed over to a man named Priest, who'd earned it. Cole recognized every machine, sat with the engine running for a moment just looking at them. The shop was lit from inside. He could see silhouettes through the high windows. 6 men, maybe 7, sitting around his table without him. He got off the bike, walked to the door, put his hand on it. Behind him, on the street, a black SUV moved slowly past the front of the building. It did not stop, but it moved at exactly the speed of a vehicle performing observation rather than transit, and the window on the passenger side was down despite the cold, which meant someone inside it was looking out rather than riding. Cole watched the SUV until it turned the corner. Then he opened the door and walked into the shop, and every man at the table went quiet, and Harlan Cade, who was 58 and built like something that had survived by being harder than what hit it, looked up from his seat at what used to be Cole's end of the table and said nothing, because some silences were more complicated than anything words could carry. Cole pulled out the chair at the head of the table. He sat down. And outside on the cold street, the black SUV turned around and came back. Harlan Cade had a way of looking at a man that made the man aware of every decision he'd ever made. It wasn't aggression. It wasn't the performative dominance that younger men used when they needed the room to know they were dangerous. It was something older and quieter than that. The specific attention of someone who had watched enough situations go wrong to understand that most disasters announce themselves in advance, and that the men who survived were the ones who learned to read the announcement. He was reading Cole now. Cole sat at the head of the table and let him. The shop smelled like it always smelled at night. Oil, metal, the residue of old exhaust that lived in the concrete and never fully left. The overhead lights were the industrial kind, fluorescent, 2 of the 4 working properly, which meant the far end of the table sat in partial shadow and the faces there were more suggested than seen. 7 men total. Marcus to Cole's left, Harlan at the far end. Between them, in various states of stillness, Priest, who had the soft tail with Cole's custom pipes, and a face that had been rearranged once by something blunt and never quite returned to its original configuration. Dex, the youngest, 26, who had joined the Brotherhood after 2 tours overseas, left him with the particular problem of not knowing what to do with himself in a world that didn't require him to be dangerous. Rook, who spoke rarely, and when he did it was worth recording. And Carver, who was 61 and had been riding longer than some of these men had been alive, and who sat with his arms crossed and his expression the neutral one he used when he already knew how a conversation was going to go and was waiting for everyone else to arrive there. Cole looked at all of them. Nobody spoke first. That was the thing about the table. The protocols were not written down, but everyone knew them. The man at the head spoke first. Cole had built that rule into the culture 12 years ago because he'd seen too many Brotherhood meetings spiral into noise, because nobody had established who carried the weight of opening. He'd walked away from the table, but he'd come back and sat down. That meant the weight was his. The SUV outside, Cole said. Black, no plates. Came by twice. We made it on the way in, Harlan said. Wells's people. They've been running surveillance on this block for 3 weeks. You knew they were watching the shop. Yes. And you called a full table meeting here anyway. Harlan's expression didn't shift. I needed to see if you'd come. Cole absorbed that, filed it next to other things about Harlan he'd been filing for 20 years. What else have you been letting them watch? Nothing that matters yet. Harlan leaned forward, put both forearms on the oak. He had a scar on his right forearm that ran from elbow to wrist. The story behind it involved a fence and a bad night in Mill Haven, and the specific category of mistake that becomes legendary only because the man survived it. Let me tell you what we know. Then you tell me what happened this morning at the Ashford house. Cole nodded once. Harlan looked at Rook, who opened a manila folder and slid it toward the center of the table. Cole pulled it closer. Photographs, printed on regular paper, the kind of documentation that didn't exist on servers. Real estate filings, a corporate structure diagram that had been drawn by hand, the handwriting cramped and precise. Garrett Wells, Harlan said, born in this city, left at 22. Came back 14 years ago with money that didn't have a clear origin story and an appetite for municipal infrastructure. Waste management contracts first, then road construction. Then, and this is where it gets careful, private development in corridors adjacent to planned city expansion zones. He knew the expansion plans before they were public, Carver said, from the shadow at the end of the table. Not a question. He knew them before they were decided, Harlan said, which means he has someone inside city planning, or city planning has someone inside his operation. The direction of the relationship is one of the things we have not yet confirmed. Cole looked at this corporate structure diagram. There were 3 holding companies between Wells's name and the actual transactions. Clean architecture. Professional. The kind of distance that required lawyers who specialized in distance. Ashwood Drive, Cole said. The Ashford property sits at the northern anchor of the development corridor. Wells needs it to complete the land package that makes the whole project viable. Without it, his investors, and he has significant foreign investment in this, Cole, the kind that doesn't negotiate politely. Without that anchor parcel, the entire corridor is worth less than the sum of its parts. Vivian won't sell. Vivian has been refusing to sell for 2 years, which is why the approach changed. Harlan paused. 8 months ago, Wells stopped making offers, started making problems. Cole looked up from the folder. Her primary banking relationship developed friction, loan reviews that had no regulatory basis. Her largest commercial tenant received a surprise health inspection that resulted in violations. The violations were corrected, but the process cost 6 weeks of lost income. Her company's bonding agency flagged her accounts for review. None of it is catastrophic alone. Together, it creates a pattern of pressure. Harlan's voice was flat, precise, the voice of a man reciting things that angered him but who had trained the anger to wait. And 3 months ago, it escalated. Dex slid a second folder toward Cole. Smaller. Fewer pages. Cole opened it. The first page was a copy of a custody petition, filed in family court 8 months ago. The petitioner was listed as the Millhaven County Department of Child and Family Services. The grounds cited were inadequate supervision of minor children, irregular household stability, and failure to maintain appropriate adult guardianship. Cole read it twice. Someone filed a report with Child Services, Marcus said quietly. Anonymous. Claimed the girls were being neglected, left unsupervised, that the household was unstable. The case was reviewed, Harlan said. Closed. Insufficient evidence. But it created a record, and records can be reopened. Cole closed the folder. He put both hands flat on the table. The fluorescent light hummed above him. Somewhere outside, a truck passed on Delman Street, and the building absorbed the vibration. He's not trying to buy the property, Cole said. No. He's trying to remove the person standing on it. That is our read. By going after the girls. Cole's voice was level. He was making significant effort to keep it level. If she loses custody, or if the threat of losing custody becomes real enough, she either sells and relocates, or she's too consumed by the legal fight to run her company, which creates the financial pressure that forces a sale anyway. It's a long game, Harlan said. But Wells plays long games. He's patient, and he has institutional reach that makes each individual move look unrelated. He looked at Cole directly. What changed last night was that he now has you on his board. He knows an Iron Shepherd brought those girls home. He knows you went back this morning. Whatever you are to that woman and those children, Wells now has a variable he didn't have before, and men like Wells don't tolerate uncontrolled variables. The table was quiet. Cole looked at the paternity petition, at the corporate diagram, at the hand-drawn map of the development corridor with Ashwood Drive sitting at the top of it like a pin in a map. There's something else, Rook said. Everyone looked at him. When Rook spoke, it was worth the attention. He reached inside his jacket and placed a photograph on the table, pushed it toward Cole with one finger. Cole looked at it. It was a photograph of Danny. Danny Rourke, 29 years old in the picture, alive, laughing at something outside the frame, standing in front of a bike that Cole recognized because he had built it. The photograph was taken at the shop. In the background, barely visible, was the oak table. 6 years ago, maybe 7. Cole picked up the photograph. His hands were steady. He made sure they were steady. "Where did this come from?" he said. "Wells's financial records," Rook said. "The ones we pulled from his corporate accounts 3 weeks ago. This photograph was attached to a file." "What file?" Rook and Harlan exchanged the briefest look, the kind that contains a decision already made about how much to say and in what order. "Talk," Cole said. One word, absolutely no temperature in it. Harlan folded his hands. "The accident that killed Danny. We've been looking at it for 8 months, since we started looking at Wells and started finding his fingerprints on things that happened in this city that were officially accidents." He paused. "Cole, the brake failure on Danny's bike." Cole stopped breathing for a moment, just for a moment. "The NTSB report said equipment failure," Cole said. Very quiet. "The NTSB report said what the NTSB report was given to say." The silence that followed that sentence was the kind that changes the shape of a room. Cole set the photograph down. He looked at it. Danny, laughing, alive, 3 years dead, killed on Route 9 when his brakes failed on a downgrade curve, and the bike went into the guardrail at 60 miles an hour, and the guardrail was not adequate to the impact, and Danny went over it. Cole had rebuilt those brakes 6 weeks before the accident. He had lived with that for 3 years. The specific, unrelenting guilt of a man who believes his hands killed his brother. He had left the brotherhood with it. He had built the emptiness of Garfield Street around it. He had ridden highways at night trying to outrun it. "You're telling me," Cole said, and his voice was now doing something it rarely did, which was threaten to stop functioning entirely, "that you have evidence the brake failure was not mechanical." "We have evidence of a payment," Harlan said, "from a holding company connected to Wells's network, to a mechanic in Mill Haven, dated 5 weeks before the accident. We have a deleted record of a service appointment, not at this shop, at a shop in Mill Haven, for a bike matching Danny's registration, 1 week before he died." Cole stood up. He did not do it violently. He stood up the way a man stands up, when the ground he's been standing on reveals itself to be something other than ground, and the body needs to move because staying still will break something that can't be repaired. He walked to the back of the shop, the industrial sink, the cold water. He ran it, put both hands under it. The water was very cold, and that was the point. Behind him, nobody at the table moved or spoke. They understood the difference between a man who needs to be followed and a man who needs a minute. These were men who had spent their lives learning that difference. Cole stood at the sink for a long time. 3 years of guilt. 3 years of believing that his hands, the hands he trusted above everything, the hands that could take a broken machine and make it whole, had failed at the one moment that cost the most. 3 years of that as the foundation of every decision, every empty room, every night on the road. And underneath all of it, invisible until now, a man in a suit in a city who had decided that Danny Rourke was an obstacle and had removed him with a payment to a mechanic in Mill Haven. Cole turned off the water, walked back to the table, sat down. The room waited. "Who else knows this?" he said. "The men in this room," Harlan said, "and whoever Wells has inside whatever agency or department you'd care to name. How solid is the payment record? Solid enough that we've had it verified twice by people whose opinion we trust." "How did you get it?" Harlan looked at him steadily, carefully. Cole looked around the table. At Marcus, who had been carrying this for weeks and had sat outside the shop this morning with 2 coffees and let Cole work it out in his own time. At Priest, whose jaw was tight with the kind of anger that had been waiting for direction. At Dex, who was 26 and had the specific stillness of someone who has learned that the most dangerous thing you can do in a tense room is move without purpose. At Rook, who had set the photograph down and was now looking at the middle distance with the expression of a man who has delivered bad news before and understands that the delivering is the easy part. At Carver, who was 61 and had seen more of this than any of them, and whose expression was not anger or grief, but something closer to the particular sorrow of a man who has watched the world be exactly what he always feared it was. "What does Harlan want?" Cole said. "What is this table asking me?" Harlan unfolded his hands, placed them palm down on the oak. "Wells is moving faster now. The development funding has a deadline. His foreign investors have a quarterly review in 6 weeks. If the Ashford parcel isn't under contract by then, The financing structure collapses and Wells faces consequences from people who are significantly more direct than lawyers. 6 weeks, Cole said, which means in the next 2 to 3 weeks, he is going to escalate against Vivian Ashford in a way that makes everything before look like courtesy. And if he's identified you as a variable, Harlan stopped. Let the implication breathe on its own. Cole looked at the photograph of Danny. The girls, he said, are they under active surveillance? Since last night, yes. We have someone on Ashwood Drive. Wells doesn't know that. Wells does not know that. Cole picked up the photograph of Danny, held it, the way you hold something you're deciding what to do with permanently. I'm coming back to the table, he said. Full seat. Full responsibility. Whatever that means for the shop schedule and everything else. Harlan nodded. One movement, no ceremony. But I'm not doing this for the Brotherhood, Cole said. He looked up, made sure Harlan was hearing the distinction. I'm doing this for those girls, and for Danny. If those two things happen to align with what the table needs, we work together. If they diverge, he set the photograph down. I do what's right for them. Understood, Harlan said. Something passed between the two men. Not warmth exactly, but the specific recognition of two people who have known each other long enough to operate on acknowledged terms. There's one more thing, Marcus said. Cole looked at him. Marcus reached into the inner pocket of his jacket and produced a folded document. He placed it on the table in front of Cole without meeting his eyes, which was how Cole knew before he unfolded it that whatever was on it was going to be worse than everything else. He unfolded it. It was a legal document, a motion filed 3 days ago in family court, not by Child Services this time, by a named petitioner, Garrett Wells, filing for an emergency guardianship review of the minor children of Vivian Ashford on the grounds of, Cole's eyes moved down the page, on the grounds that the children had been found unsupervised in dangerous weather conditions, placed in the care of an unknown individual with a criminal record, and transported on a motorcycle without appropriate safety equipment or legal authorization. Cole. He was in the document, not by name, as an unidentified male with known affiliations to an outlaw motorcycle organization. The filing cited the security footage from Ashwood Drive's exterior cameras, which had recorded the previous night's events in sufficient detail to be submitted as evidence. Wells had moved in less than 12 hours. He hadn't waited to see what Cole was. He'd used Cole the moment Cole appeared. The return of the girls, the one thing that had felt, in the cold and the rain, like the most straightforward act of the past 6 years, had been converted into ammunition before the girls' coats were dry. Cole folded the document, set it down. He looked at the table, at the men around it, at the oak he'd built with his own hands 12 years ago because he believed that some things were worth building to last. He knows about the paternity, Cole said. Flat, certain. Marcus hesitated. That half-second was its own answer. He doesn't know for certain, Marcus said, but the filing, the language in it, it positions him to request a formal inquiry into the biological relationship between you and the minor child. If you try to assert any parental interest, he uses it to amplify the guardianship motion. If you stay away, he uses the absence to argue the children's biological connection to an outlaw represents an ongoing risk. The trap was elegant. Cole could see it fully now, the way you see the shape of something from high enough up. Approach in Wells weaponizes the connection. Retreat in Wells uses the absence. Move through the legal system and Wells had the system. Move outside the legal system and Wells had the documentation. Every path had been accounted for, except one. Cole stood, walked to the roll-up door, hit the switch. The door went up and the cold night came in, bringing with it the smell of rain that hadn't finished yet, an exhaust from Delman Street and the particular cold of a city at midnight. He stood in the opening. His Harley was in the lot, next to the others, in the orange wash of the single working exterior light. He looked at it. He thought about Lily in his jacket, one button eye on the rabbit, trusting him with the most important thing she owned. He thought about Mara at the top of the stairs in one sock, asking if he was coming back. He thought about Vivian's hands shaking almost imperceptibly when she took the business card, and the coffee she'd poured him black before he'd asked, and the way she'd said Garrett with one word that contained 7 different things. He thought about Danny, laughing at something outside the frame, alive in a photograph in a dead man's file. Cole turned around. I need everything you have on Wells, he said. Every file, every photograph, every payment record, everything Rook pulled, everything Carver's been sitting on, everything Harlan has been building for 8 months. What are you going to do with it? Harlan said. I'm going to take it to Vivian Ashford tonight. Cole, she has a right to know what she's in the middle of. She has a right to make a decision with full information. He looked at Harlan steadily. And she has resources and institutional access that we don't. Her company's legal team, her financial relationships, the people she knows in this city's infrastructure. She's been fighting Wells alone because she didn't know who he was or how large this was. That ends tonight. If you go to her with this, Wells will know within hours, Carver said from the shadow. He has eyes on that house. Good, Cole said. Then he'll know she's not alone anymore. He held out his hand toward Rook. Rook looked at him, looked at Harlan. Harlan gave one small nod. Rook gathered the folders, both of them, the photograph of Danny on top, and placed them in Cole's hand. Cole tucked them inside his jacket. He looked at Marcus. Get everyone clear of the shop, tonight. Don't sleep anywhere you slept last night. He looked at Dex. The SUV, the black one. Find out where it goes when it leaves this block. Don't engage, just find out where it goes. Dex nodded once, already moving in his head. Priest, Rook. Cole looked at them both. Ashwood Drive. Not visible. I need eyes on that house and I need them there before I arrive. They were already standing. Cole looked at Harlan last. The man who had held the table when Cole wasn't at it. The man who had been building a case for 8 months and had waited, with what patience cost Harlan Cade, for Cole to come back on his own. We should have told you about Danny sooner, Harlan said. The words were careful. They cost him something. Yeah, Cole said. You should have. He held Harlan's eyes for one more second, long enough to let the man feel the weight of the concession without rubbing it in. Then he walked out into the cold and threw a leg over the Harley and had it running before the roll-up door finished coming back down. He hit Ashwood Drive at 12:40. Priest and Rook were already there. Invisible, positioned on the cross streets, visible only as the brief red ember of a cigarette from a shadow that most people would not have identified as a person. Cole rode past without acknowledging them, came around the block and approached the gate from the east, which the exterior cameras covered less completely. He'd noted the camera angles on his morning visit. He pressed the intercom. 30 seconds of silence. Then Vivian's voice, alert in a way that meant she had not been sleeping. Who is it? Cole. A pause. The gate opened. He rode up the drive. The house was mostly dark. A light in the upstairs hallway. A lamp in the room he thought was a study, to the right of the entrance. She met him at the front door in a dark sweater and socks, her hair down, her face carrying the particular alertness of someone who had been sitting with a problem they didn't have enough information to solve. She looked at the folders under his arm. Come in, she said. He followed her to the study, which was smaller than the kitchen but felt more lived in. A desk covered in papers, a reading chair with a blanket thrown across it, a row of books that had actually been read judging by their wear, a small lamp that made the room amber and close. He sat across from her desk. She sat behind it. He put the folders on the desk between them. She opened the first one. Cole watched her face as she read. Vivian Ashford was a woman who had built an entire discipline around not letting her face be read. He could see the discipline at work. The slight tightening of the jaw, the controlled breath, the careful, measured movement of her eyes down each page as if she were reading a contract, not the architecture of her own destruction. She got to the child services filing, read it, turned the page. She got to the guardianship motion, the one with Cole in it. Her hand stopped moving. She was very still for a moment. Then she looked up at him. He filed this 3 days ago, she said. Yes. That means he was already... before last night. The surveillance was already in place. What happened last night gave him material to use faster. Her jaw tightened. She looked back at the document. Then she turned to the next page and found the corporate structure diagram and the payment records and started reading the document that described what had been done to Danny Rourke on Route 9 3 years ago. Cole sat quietly. She read it twice. He could tell by the way her eyes moved. When she looked up again, her face had changed in a way he couldn't entirely categorize. Not softer, harder in some places, but with a fracture running through it. The specific fracture of a person who has been fighting alone and has just discovered the fight is significantly larger and darker than they understood. The mechanic, she said. In Millhaven. We're working on locating him. I have a private investigator, she said, who is not connected to anything Wells can see. Let me put him on the mechanic. She paused. His name will be admissible. Yours might not be. Cole looked at her. She looked back with the steadiness he'd noticed on the doorstep last night, the kind that comes from having been the most composed person in the room for so many years that the composure has become structural. We need to talk about the paternity test, she said. We do. Tonight. Yeah. She opened the desk drawer. She took out a small sealed packet, a commercial DNA testing kit, the kind that a person orders when they've been thinking about making a decision for a very long time and one night decides to stop thinking and act. She set it on the desk. I ordered it 2 weeks ago, she said. I wasn't sure if I had the right to. She paused. I'm sure now. Cole looked at the kit. Outside, somewhere beyond the iron gate, on the dark street that Priest and Rook were watching, a car door opened and closed. Cole's phone buzzed. He looked at it. A text from Priest. 2 words. They're here. He looked up at Vivian. She had seen his face change. What is it? She said. Wells's people. Outside the gate. She absorbed this without flinching, reached for her phone, started to dial. Who are you calling? Cole said. My lawyer. At 12:50 in the morning. He works for me, she said simply, and waited for the call to connect. Cole stood and moved to the study window, no curtain fully drawn, the lamp behind him creating a silhouette, and looked out at the dark front garden and the gate beyond it. He couldn't see the car from this angle. He moved back from the window. His phone buzzed again. This time it was Marcus. Dex followed the SUV. Cole. The SUV is registered to a municipal account, City Planning Department. Cole read the text twice. Wells didn't just have someone inside the City Planning Department. Wells was the City Planning Department, which meant every legal protection they had assumed they could reach, every petition, every appeal, every institutional channel Vivian's lawyers would try to access had already been accounted for. The phone buzzed a third time. Dex this time. A photograph, taken from a distance, through a telephoto lens, poor light but sufficient. The man in the passenger seat of the SUV. Cole stared at the photograph for a very long time. Then he put his phone in his pocket. He looked at Vivian, who had finished her call and was watching him with the expression of someone who has learned to read the temperature of a room from the way people hold their phones after looking at them. Tell me, she said. Cole turned the phone around, showed her the photograph. Vivian looked at it. Her face did something that wasn't flinching and wasn't composure. It was recognition. That's my company's CFO, she said, very quietly. He's worked for me for 4 years. The man in the photograph was sitting in Wells's car at 12:50 in the morning outside Vivian Ashford's gate, and his name was apparently on Vivian's payroll, which meant the fight that Vivian had believed was coming from outside had been growing from inside for 4 years. Cole looked at the DNA kit on the desk. He looked at the folder containing Danny's photograph. He looked at the woman across the desk, who had been fighting a war on every front simultaneously without knowing the front that mattered most was inside her own walls. Lock this house, Cole said. Every door, every window. Don't let anyone in. Housekeeper, driver, anyone, without calling me first. Cole, the girls, he said. Where do they sleep? Upstairs, east side. I need you to move them to the west side rooms, tonight, right now before you do anything else. She stood without hesitation. At the doorway she stopped. Cole. She turned back. Her eyes were the eyes of someone who has arrived at a moment they cannot manage alone and has decided to stop pretending otherwise. Whatever the test says, whatever the result is, I need you to know that what Lily said last night. She stopped, started again. She said it because she recognized something. Children recognize things before they have the words for them. Cole said nothing, but he didn't look away. She went upstairs. He stood in the amber study light with Danny's photograph in the folder on the desk, and Wells's car outside the gate, and a mole 4 years deep in the company of the woman he was apparently the father of a child with. And he understood with complete, cold clarity that the version of Cole Rourke, who rode alone through empty streets and kept everyone at sufficient distance to keep them safe, was not equal to what this situation required. This required something he had not been in a very long time. Something he had, in fact, been trying not to be since Danny died. The man the Brotherhood built him to be. His phone buzzed once more. Priest. Second vehicle. South side of the property. They're not just watching, Cole. They're positioning. Cole put the phone in his pocket, picked up the folders, picked up the DNA kit, and began to make the kind of decisions that cannot be unmade. Cole made 4 calls in the next 8 minutes. He made them standing in the study with the lamp off and the room dark, and his back to the wall beside the window, far enough from the glass that the angle made him invisible from outside. The folders were tucked inside his jacket. The DNA kit was in his inside pocket, next to his chest, next to the photograph of Danny. First call. Marcus. 40 seconds. Get everyone mobile. Full formation. Ashwood Drive. Come in from the north, not the gate. There's a service entrance on the east wall, behind the property line. Harlan knows it. Marcus didn't ask questions. The line went dead. Second call. Priest. 20 seconds. The second vehicle? South side. Don't let it move closer, but do not engage until I say. Priest said 1 word. Copy. Third call? Rook. 15 seconds. I need you inside the perimeter. Find a way. You have 7 minutes. Fourth call. A number he hadn't dialed in 3 years. A man named Calloway, who worked in the district attorney's office and who owed the Iron Shepherds a debt that had no dollar value. A debt denominated in the currency of a situation that had been managed quietly, years ago, in a way that cost the Brotherhood something and saved Calloway everything. The call rang 6 times. Cole was about to end it when Calloway picked up, voice thick with interrupted sleep. It's Cole Rourke, Cole said. I know what time it is. I need you to listen. He talked for 4 minutes. He described the payment records, the mechanic in Mill Haven, the corporate structure, the municipal account the SUV was registered to. He described the guardianship motion and the child services filing and the name of the CFO who was currently sitting in a car outside Vivian Ashford's gate at 1 in the morning. He was precise. He used dates. He used amounts. He used the kind of specific, verifiable detail that a man in Calloway's position could not hear and then claim not to have heard. When he finished, there was silence on the line. Cole, Calloway said, if any of this is, it's documented. I'll have it to you by morning. Physical copies, not digital. More silence. The municipal account, Calloway said. If that checks out, it'll check out. Then you need to give me until morning to, I need you to make 1 call tonight, Cole said. To whoever in this city you trust most who isn't connected to city planning. 1 call. Tell them to be ready for documentation by 6 a.m. The silence this time was the silence of a man doing math on his own career. Make the call, Calloway, Cole said. You know what you owe. He ended the call. Upstairs, he could hear Vivian moving, the soft sounds of doors opening and closing, the murmur of her voice speaking quietly to the girls, the half-conscious protests of children being relocated from warm beds at an hour that made no sense to them. He listened to those sounds for a moment. Let them be real. Let them mean what they meant. Then he went back to work. He pulled out the corporate diagram from the folder and photographed every page with his phone, then forwarded the images to Marcus, Harlan, and Calloway's number. He photographed the payment records, the guardianship motion, the child services filing, every page. He was thorough and he was fast and he kept his breathing even because the moment you stop controlling your breathing is the moment your hands start making decisions without you. Vivian came back downstairs in 12 minutes. They're in the west room, she said. Mara is awake. She knows something's wrong. She didn't ask questions. A pause. She's 8. She's been reading rooms since she was 4. Lock their door, Cole said. From the inside, Mara knows how. Yes. Good. Vivian looked at him across the dark study. In the faint light coming through the window, ambient, the orange glow of streetlights diffused through trees and rain clouds. Her face was a composition of shadow and decision. She had changed while she was upstairs. Not her clothes. Something behind her eyes. The last negotiable thing had been put away. What do you need from me? She said. Everything you have on your CFO. Brendan Hoyle. His name is Brendan Hoyle. Financial records. Communications. Anything he's had access to in the last 4 years. My home system has a backup server. In the basement. It's air-gapped, not connected to the company network. She paused. I set it up 8 months ago, when I started feeling like things were moving in ways I couldn't account for. Cole looked at her. You already suspected. I suspected someone. I didn't know who. She held his eyes. I didn't suspect the scope. Can you pull his access logs from the home server? Give me 20 minutes. You have 10. She went. Cole moved through the downstairs of the house systematically. He was not thinking about the particulars of what he was doing. He was operating from the part of him that existed below thought, the part that had been built over 20 years of understanding how spaces could be managed and where danger came from and what it sounded like when it was getting close. He checked every window on the ground floor, every door. The kitchen had a back entrance that opened to a service path. He locked it and moved a heavy oak bench in front of it without ceremony. The dining room had French doors to the rear garden, locked, but the lock was decorative, the kind that felt secure without being so. He found a length of copper pipe in the utility closet beside the kitchen and ran it through the door handles. He went back to the front study. His phone lit up. Marcus. 3 minutes out. Service entrance is open. Harlan's with me. Then Rook. Inside. East garden wall. I see the south vehicle. 2 men. One is outside the car. Cole texted back. Hold. He called Dex. Where are you? Cole said. 2 blocks north. I've been watching the gate. How many vehicles total? 3 now. The black SUV out front, the second one on the south side that Priest is watching, and a third that came in 15 minutes ago and parked half a block east. That one's dark, no engine running. 3 vehicles, at minimum 6 men, possibly more. This was not surveillance anymore. Dex, the third vehicle. Anyone visible inside? Too dark to tell from here. Get eyes on it. Close as you can without being made. And Dex, if anyone gets out of that vehicle before I give the word, call me immediately. Don't text. Call. Got it. Cole put the phone down. He could feel the timeline compressing. Wells's people had been patient for weeks. Slow, methodical, institutional. But patience had a breaking point. And the breaking point was the moment Cole walked into that study with the folders. Because Wells had cameras on this property and people on this street, and he would know, or would soon know, that whatever advantage he'd held in the information war was eroding. When institutional pressure stopped working, men like Wells reached for something less institutional. Cole had been in enough situations to know the difference between the minutes before something happened and the minutes after nothing had yet. These were the minutes before. Vivian came back from the basement with a laptop and a portable drive. She set them on the desk and opened the screen, and the blue light of it made the dark study suddenly very small and very specific. 4 years of access logs, she said. Hoyle had administrator credentials to the company's client database, contracts, financial projections, acquisition targets. Her voice was controlled in the way a voice is controlled when the person speaking is running anger through a very tight filter. He would have been able to see every legal motion I filed, every complaint, every time I engaged with a regulatory body or a city official. He fed it to Wells. Everything I tried. She sat down hard in the desk chair. The composure cracked, briefly, a half-second fracture. Every time I thought I found a path and it closed in front of me, she stopped. It wasn't bad luck. No, Cole said. She put her hands flat on the desk, looked at them. Something moved across her face that had been living behind the controlled surface for a very long time. He was in my house, she said, quietly. He came to Mara's birthday party. He gave Lily a stuffed bear. She stopped. Cole said nothing. Because there was nothing adequate to say, and he had learned a long time ago that the adequate thing and the true thing were rarely the same, and that in the gap between them, silence was often the most honest response available. His phone rang. Dex. Cole picked up. Someone just got out of the third vehicle, Dex said. Fast, low. Cole. He's not dressed like a driver. He's got a bag, the kind you carry equipment in. What direction? He's heading toward the east garden wall, toward Rook. Cole was already moving. He held the phone to his ear and crossed the hallway and opened the front door and stepped onto the stone steps. The cold hit him immediately. Damp, heavy, the specific cold of a night that had been raining for hours and had not finished. He could see the gate 60 yards away, and beyond it the dark street, and the suggestion of the SUV's shape. "Rook," he said into the phone. "Rook, come in." No answer. He tried again. Nothing. He kept his voice level when he turned back to Vivian, who had appeared in the doorway behind him. "Stay inside," he said. "Don't open the door for anyone who doesn't tell you my name first. Cole, my name. First thing they say. If they don't say it, don't open it." He went down the steps. He moved across the wet gravel drive in the dark, away from the lamp above the front door, into the shadow of the trees that lined the property's eastern edge. The garden was large and dark and wet, the grass soaked from last night's rain, the bushes heavy with it, the trees making the kind of small dripping sounds that covered other sounds, which was a problem. He found Rook in the shadow of the east garden wall. Rook was on his feet, which was good. He had one hand braced against the stone wall and his other hand pressed to his left side, which was not. His face in the faint light was the face of a man working very hard to assess his own damage before reacting to it. "How bad?" Cole said. Already at his side, hand on Rook's shoulder. "Not deep," Rook said. His breath was short. "He had a knife. I had a wall." He paused. "The wall won." "Where is he?" "Still outside the perimeter. I stopped him at the wall." Rook straightened, winced. "He's not the only one, Cole. Before he came at me, I saw two more on the east side. They're spreading around the property." Cole pulled out his phone. Hit Marcus. "We're at the service entrance," Marcus said immediately. "Get everyone inside. Now. All of them. Harlan, too." Cole looked at Rook's side. Dark stain, not catastrophic, the kind of wound that permitted function for a limited time. "We have a man down and at least 3 on the east side of the property, possibly more. This is not surveillance anymore." "Copy," Marcus said. 2 minutes. Cole pulled Rook's arm over his shoulder. Rook allowed it for the length of time it took to cross 10 feet of wet grass, then straightened and moved on his own, jaw set, breathing measured. Some men leaned in to help. Rook received it briefly and moved on, which was its own kind of statement. They came back around the north side of the house as the service entrance gate opened, and Marcus came through first, then Harlan, then Priest and Dex, and 2 men Cole recognized from the table. Vance and Caldwell, who had not been at the meeting but who were here now, which meant the call had gone out while Cole was on the phone with Calloway. 8 men total, inside the perimeter. Harlan looked at Rook's side, looked at Cole. "How many outside?" Harlan said. "Minimum 5, Cole said. "Probably more." "They're going to move on the house," Harlan said. Not a question. "They're already moving." Cole looked at the property, the front gate, the south wall, the east wall where Rook had been hit, the north service entrance now closed behind the Brotherhood, the house at the center of all of it. Wells knows the documentation is in play. He knows we're here. The window for doing this quietly just closed, and he knows it. "So what's he doing?" Priest. "He's making one last move to control what's inside that house," Cole said. "The documentation, Vivian, possibly the girls, as leverage." He said the last part with a flatness that was not detachment, but its opposite. The specific suppression of something too large to let into his voice without losing the ability to function. He can't afford a public fight now. He needs this resolved tonight, in his favor, before Calloway can move in the morning. Harlan looked at him steadily. "What do you need?" "I need the perimeter held. Nobody gets to that house. Not through the front gate, not through the south wall, not through any point on this property line." Cole looked around the group. "You don't need to engage if they don't advance. But if they advance, you do not let them through." Harlan turned to the assembled men and began speaking in the low, efficient register he used when a situation had resolved from a discussion into a set of tasks. He divided them into positions, 2 on the front gate, Priest and Caldwell on the south wall, Vance on the north entrance. Marcus would stay with Cole. Cole went back to the house. Vivian was in the hallway when he came through the front door. She had her phone in her hand. She looked at his face when he came in, and she didn't ask if things were bad. "My lawyer is filing an emergency injunction," she said, "against the guardianship motion. It'll be on record by 6 a.m. "Good. And I called someone else." She paused. "Someone I should have called months ago." Elaine Marsh. She's a municipal oversight investigator. Independent office, not connected to city planning. I've known her for 12 years. She is not Wells's. Cole looked at her. I sent her the photographs of Hoyle in the SUV and the payment records you forwarded to your phone, Vivian said. She's awake. She's reading them. When did you? While you were in the garden. A pause. You said lock the doors. You didn't say don't make calls. Something almost moved on Cole's face. Marcus, behind him, made a sound that might have been a suppressed comment. How long has she been an investigator? Cole said. 14 years. She oversaw the Graymont contracts case. Wells was a peripheral figure in that case. She knows his structure. Vivian's eyes were steady. She said she can have a team with subpoena authority at Hoyle's residence by morning. If he's been conducting this from a personal device, which she thinks is likely given the kind of documentation you described, the device is what she needs. Cole nodded. It was good. Better than good. It was the institutional anchor the documentation needed, a chain of custody that ran through an authority Wells could not reach. He became aware that Marcus was tapping his arm. He looked at Marcus. Marcus showed him his phone. A text from Priest. They're at the south wall, not climbing yet, but they're at it. And then, before Cole could respond, a sound. Not from outside. From inside the house. Upstairs. A door. Not opening. Closing. The specific sound of a door being closed from the inside by someone who had not wanted it to be heard, which meant the person closing it was aware of the need for silence, which meant it was not a child waking up confused, and it was not Vivian because Vivian was standing 6 feet away. Cole was moving before the thought was complete. He took the stairs 2 at a time in absolute silence. Boots on the hardwood runner, weight distributed, no sound he could control eliminated. Marcus was behind him, a half step back, the same silence. At the top of the stairs, the hallway split left and right. The west rooms were to the right. The girls were in the west rooms. The door Mara had been told to lock from the inside. He reached it. The door was open. 3 inches. No more. Cole put his back to the wall beside the door frame. Marcus on the other side. They looked at each other. Cole held up 3 fingers, then 2, then 1. He pushed the door open and went through. The room was dark. 2 beds. The shapes of children in the nearer one, both of them, Lily and Mara, together, the way children consolidate when frightened. They were awake. Lily had her face pressed against Mara's shoulder. Mara's eyes were open, and she was looking at the far side of the room with the terrified, calculating expression of an 8-year-old who has understood that something is very wrong and is trying to figure out what she has available. In the far corner between the dresser and the window was a man. He was not large. He was the kind of not large that people mistake for safe, medium height, unremarkable, the kind of face that registers and then erases itself from memory. He was wearing dark clothes and he had a phone in his hand, screened toward the floor, and he was looking at Cole with the specific expression of someone whose plan has developed an unanticipated variable. The window behind him was open 2 inches. He hadn't come through the door. He'd come through the wall, through a window that should have been locked, that had been locked, that had been opened from outside with the kind of tool you carry when your job is accessing places you haven't been invited. Cole did not speak immediately. He stood in the doorway and looked at the man with the phone and let the man understand, from the quality of the silence and the specific way Cole occupied the space, exactly what was being communicated without words. Then Cole said very quietly, "Mara, take your sister and go to the hallway. Don't run. Walk." Mara moved without hesitation. She got Lily by the hand and got off the bed and walked, controlled, her eyes forward, past the man in the corner without looking at him, past Cole in the doorway, into the hallway where Marcus was waiting and where Vivian appeared at the top of the stairs with an expression that crossed every maintained boundary she'd ever built. Cole stepped fully into the room. He closed the door behind him. The man with the phone looked at the closed door, looked at Cole. He made the calculation that men in his position make when the mathematics have changed, and found that the mathematics had changed significantly. "The phone," Cole said. The man hesitated for a fraction of a second. "Don't," Cole said. 1 word, at a register that did not require elaboration. The man set the phone on the dresser. Cole picked it up. The screen showed a live feed, exterior camera footage from what looked like the front gate. Wells's people had their own eyes on the property, and this man had been monitoring from inside, coordinating with whoever was outside, and had been in this room long enough to have photographed the girls, possibly to have recorded them. Cole looked at the phone for a long moment. Then he put it in his pocket. He looked at the man. "You're going to tell me," Cole said, "exactly when you came into this house, how you got in, and who knows you're here. You're going to tell me this in the next 2 minutes, and then you're going to sit on that floor and wait for the people who are coming to ask you the same questions with credentials." He paused. "Or you can try the window again, and we'll have a different conversation." The man looked at the window, looked at Cole. He sat on the floor. He started talking. His name was Ferris. He worked private security, contractor, not direct Wells employee, which was exactly the kind of buffer Wells used at every level of his operation. He'd been given a key, not to the window, a digital override device for the window sensor, and instructions to document the presence of the minor children and retrieve any documentation visible in the study. He'd had 2 hours to complete the task before a secondary team moved on the front entrance as a diversion. The secondary team. "When?" Cole said. 15 minutes from now." Ferris looked at his watch. "Maybe 12. Cole was already calling Harlan. "Front gate," Cole said. "They're running a diversion in approximately 12 minutes. The real push is somewhere else while your attention is on the front. Figure out where." He looked at Ferris on the floor. "Where's the real push?" he said. Ferris was quiet for 2 seconds. Cole didn't move toward him. He didn't need to. The quality of the stillness he projected in that moment was sufficient. "The basement," Ferris said. "There's a utility access beneath the east garden. Storm drain. It connects to the property's sub-foundation." The secondary team. Cole was running, down the stairs, through the kitchen. He hit the basement door and yanked it open and took the stairs fast, pulling out his phone, light on, sweeping the basement. The air-gapped server Vivian had mentioned, the utility systems, a washer and dryer against the south wall, exposed pipes running the ceiling, and in the far corner, set into the concrete floor, a utility access panel. It was moving, not open, but moving, the slow, careful movement of something being pushed from below by a person who did not want to be heard. Cole crossed the basement in 7 strides. He put both hands on the access panel and his full weight on top of it and held it. From below, the sudden stopping of movement, a pause, then pressure, significant, 2 or more people pushing upward. Cole held. His boots found purchase on the concrete beside the panel, arms braced, every relevant muscle engaged, and he held with the absolute commitment of a man who has decided that this particular line is where everything stops. He heard footsteps on the basement stairs behind him. Marcus. Then Harlan. They came without being asked and put their weight beside his, and the pushing from below stopped, and in the silence that followed, broken only by heavy breathing and the distant sound of engines from the street and the rain beginning again on the windows above, Cole heard from somewhere above him, from the floor that held the kitchen and the hallway and the front door, the sound of the doorbell. 3 rings. Deliberate. Official. And then a voice amplified from outside. "Ms. Ashford, this is the Municipal Oversight Office. We have a warrant. Please open the door." Elaine Marsh, 14 years as a municipal investigator, oversaw the Graymont case. She'd moved faster than morning. Cole kept his weight on the access panel and looked at Harlan, and Harlan looked back at him. And in the amber and shadow of the basement, with the rain coming down and the pressure below them and the official voice above, something passed between them that had been trying to pass for 3 years and had finally found the moment. From outside came the sound of more vehicles, more doors. Official. The sound of authority arriving in numbers. The pressure on the access panel stopped. The men below were listening. They could hear it too. Cole stayed where he was. He was not moving until every door was closed and every exit covered, and every person in this house, every small sleeping person in the West Room, every woman who had been fighting alone for 2 years, every man who had ridden across a cold city on a Brotherhood call, was confirmed, accounted for, and upright. His phone rang. "Priest's number," Cole answered. "They're pulling back," Priest said, "from the south wall, from the dark and the rain. All of them. Every vehicle. They made the other cars arriving, and they're—" A pause, the sound of engines. "They're gone, Cole." Cole released a breath he had been holding for 12 minutes. He looked at Marcus, at Harlan, at the access panel beneath his hands, still and silent now. The pressure below it dissolved into the night. He straightened up. His arms were shaking slightly, not from fear, from the sustained effort of holding a line that needed to be held. He let them shake for a moment, and then he controlled it. He looked at Harlan. "Wells knows the documentation is out," Cole said. "Calloway, Marsh, the injunction filing. By morning, there are 4 institutional threads he can't pull back." "He'll go to ground," Harlan said. "He'll try." Cole put his phone in his pocket. "We're not letting him." He went back upstairs. Vivian was in the hallway with the girls, Lily asleep against her shoulder, transferred seamlessly from waking to sleep the way small children do in the arms of the person they trust most. Mara awake beside her, holding her mother's hand with both of hers in the grip of a child who has made a decision about proximity and does not intend to renegotiate it tonight. Mara looked at Cole when he came up the basement stairs. 8 years old, eyes like someone older. She looked at him for a moment with the full, unfiltered assessment she'd been applying to the world since she was 4 years old. "Is it done?" she asked. Cole looked at this child, at her mother, at Lily asleep in a way that trusted entirely that the people awake would handle what needed handling. "Not yet," he said, because Mara deserved the truth in the calibration it could bear. "But it's closer." She nodded. "Once. Like a person who has been given a workable answer and is prepared to act on it." From the front of the house came the sound of knocking, official, measured, and Vivian's phone lit up with a name, Elaine. Cole looked at Vivian. She looked at him. In the hallway of the limestone house, in the rain, with the Brotherhood holding a perimeter outside and an investigator at the front door, and a man named Ferris sitting on a floor upstairs waiting to describe everything he knew, and a photograph of Danny in Cole's jacket pocket and a DNA kit beside it, Cole understood that the night had reached the particular hour that comes before resolution. Not the resolution itself, but the last moment before the final move, when every piece is positioned and the only remaining question is whether the person whose hand it is has the nerve to play it. He looked at Vivian. She transferred Lily to his arms without asking. The child settled against his chest with the absolute devastating trust of someone who has already made her determination about where she belongs. And Cole Rourke, who had spent 6 years making himself into someone that nothing could reach, stood in a hallway holding a child who might be his daughter, while the woman who had been carrying everything alone went to open the door and let the morning in. Elaine Marsh was 51 years old and had the kind of face that had stopped performing patient somewhere around year 6 of her career and had settled into the real thing, a genuine load-bearing tolerance for the distance between how things were supposed to work and how they actually did. She came through the front door of the Ashford house with 2 deputies and a forensic technician and a tablet under her arm, and she looked at Cole holding a sleeping child in the hallway with the expression of a woman who had walked into enough complicated situations to have stopped being surprised by the shape of them. She looked at Vivian. "You should have called me 8 months ago," she said. "I know," Vivian said. "We'll talk about that later." She moved past them toward the study. "Right now I need the server and everything on it." She worked through the rest of the night. Cole sat in the kitchen. Mara had finally fallen asleep on the couch in the adjacent sitting room, curled under a blanket that Vivian had retrieved without being asked, and Cole had transferred Lily to the same couch without waking her, and the 2 of them were breathing with the complete physical confidence of children who had decided the danger was over and had simply moved on into sleep the way children do, total, instantaneous, without the grinding machinery of adult transition. He sat at the kitchen island and drank coffee that someone, Marcus, he thought, operating in the kitchen with the quiet efficiency of a man who had managed enough long nights to know that caffeination was a form of care, had made at some point in the last hour. It was 4:30 in the morning. Through the kitchen window the sky was still dark, but the darkness had changed quality, beginning its slow withdrawal from the absolute to the approximate, the specific shift that happens an hour before dawn when the night acknowledges it is losing. Marcus sat across the island. They didn't speak for a while. Outside, the Brotherhood held the perimeter, not from aggression anymore, just from the settled discipline of men who had been asked to hold a line and were holding it until they were told otherwise. Cole could see the red ember of Priest's cigarette through the kitchen window, moving slowly along the south wall. A sentinel doing what sentinels do. Patient, cold, Present. Harlan came in from the garden at 4:45. He poured himself coffee without being offered it, in the way of a man who has decided that a house containing people he has chosen to protect is house enough to move through freely. He sat beside Marcus. The three of them in the kitchen. Coffee and the sounds of the investigator working in the study and the breathing of sleeping children from the sitting room. Ferris is in custody, Harlan said. Low. Informational. Marsh's deputies processed him an hour ago. He gave a full account. Wells, Cole said. The account names him directly, explicitly. Harlan wrapped both hands around his mug. Ferris is a contractor, but he kept records. The kind of records a man keeps when he's smart enough to know that men like Wells eventually need someone to absorb blame and plans accordingly. Digital? Encrypted drive in his bag. Marsh's technician is working on it. A pause. It's enough, Cole. What we pulled from the corporate structure, what Ferris gave, what Vivian's server shows. It's enough. Cole nodded. Enough. He turned the word over. After 3 years of carrying the weight of Danny's death as a private internal verdict, his hands, his failure, his guilt worn into the bone, the word enough felt strange in the context of external justice. He didn't know what to do with it yet. He suspected he would have to wait and learn. The mechanic, Cole said. Millhaven. Marsh has a name from Ferris. She's moving on him this morning. Harlan looked at his coffee, then at Cole. It won't bring Danny back. No, Cole said. But it'll be on record. What happened on Route 9, why it happened, who paid for it. Harlan paused. Danny deserves to be on record. Cole's jaw tightened once. Released. He looked at his hands on the counter. The knuckles, the ink, the grease that never fully left the creases regardless of how thoroughly he washed. The hands he had believed for 3 years had failed when it mattered most. They hadn't failed. Someone had used them, used his competence and his trust and his love for his brother to construct a guilt he carried without question, because it was the kind of guilt that fit perfectly in the specific hollows left by the kind of man he was. He picked up his coffee. Drank. At 5:15, Elaine Marsh came to the kitchen doorway. She looked at the three men at the island with the assessing look of someone completing an inventory. Then she spoke to Cole specifically. I want to tell you what we have, she said, so you understand the shape of it. Cole said, Go ahead. She didn't sit. She stood in the doorway with her tablet and her 14 years and her voice like a document. Precise, specific, without ornament. Brendan Hoyle, Vivian's CFO, had been on Wells's payroll for 4.5 years, 6 months before Vivian hired him. He had been, from the beginning, an insertion. His entire employment at Ashford Holdings had been a fabrication in service of a surveillance operation against the company and its owner. Every legal strategy Vivian attempted had been relayed to Wells within 24 hours of it being developed. Every filing, every approach to city officials, every attempt to build an evidentiary case against the pressure being applied to her business. Hoyle had seen it and passed it on, and Wells had adjusted accordingly. That was why she kept losing ground she should have been able to hold. That was why every path closed. The child services filing had been engineered by Wells through a contact in the department, a deputy administrator who had received 2 payments from a shell corporation connected to Wells's network. The second payment made 1 week before the anonymous report was filed. The guardianship motion had been drafted by a lawyer who believed he was working for a client with legitimate standing concerns. The client was a corporate entity 3 layers removed from Wells. The municipal account the surveillance SUV was registered to was connected to a city planning deputy who had been receiving supplementary income from a Wells-adjacent consulting firm for 6 years. And the payment to the mechanic in Mill Haven, the payment dated 5 weeks before Danny Rourke's death on Route 9, had originated from a holding company that Marsh's office had been peripherally investigating in connection with an unrelated infrastructure contract case. She had not connected it to Danny's accident because nobody had told her to look. She was telling Cole all of this so he understood that the shape of what Wells had built was not the shape of a man who committed crimes. It was the shape of a man who had constructed a machinery that committed crimes on his behalf at sufficient distance that no individual act was clearly illegal until you saw all of them together. Tonight gave us the view from high enough to see all of them together, Marsh said. She looked at Cole steadily. The documentation your people compiled, the server data, Ferris's account, and the device we recovered from Hoyle's residence an hour ago. His personal phone, which he did not have time to destroy because my investigator was at his door before he knew we were coming. Together they form a complete picture. She paused. Garrett Wells will be in custody by 8 o'clock this morning. The kitchen was very quiet. Marcus made a sound that wasn't a word. Harlan set down his coffee. Cole looked at the window. The sky outside was beginning its first tentative movement toward gray. Not light yet, not even close, but the darkness pulling back one fraction, the horizon beginning to remember. It had a job to do. Danny Rourke, Cole said. It'll be part of the case. It will be part of the case, Marsh said. The payment record, the mechanic, the service appointment, all of it. She held his eyes. I'm sorry it took this long to find. Cole nodded once. She went back to the study. He sat with it. The three of them sat with it, in the kitchen, with the coffee going cold in their mugs, and the sleeping children breathing in the next room, and the sky outside doing what it had been doing every morning since before any of them were born, refusing to stay dark no matter how long the night had been. Vivian found him there at 6. She had slept for 45 minutes. He knew, because Marcus had watched the clock, and had enforced it with the particular immovable quiet of a man who understood that a person who had been running on adrenaline for 8 months would simply cease to function if not made to stop. She came into the kitchen in the gray sweater, her hair loose, her face carrying the specific aftermath of a short sleep taken under pressure, not rested, but recalibrated. Marcus and Harlan had moved to the front sitting room. The kitchen was empty except for Cole. She looked at the girls asleep through the doorway, looked at Cole. Mara woke up once, he said. About an hour ago. She looked at me, decided things were acceptable, and went back to sleep. Something happened on Vivian's face that was not a smile, but was in the neighborhood of one. She poured coffee, sat across from him. For a moment they just existed in the same space with the morning coming in through the window and the sounds of the investigation winding toward its conclusions in the study down the hall. Hoyle, she said, quietly. Marsh has him. 4.5 years. She looked at her hands. He came to Mara's birthday party. I know. He knew everything I was planning and he... She stopped, breathed. I feel like an idiot. You're not an idiot, Cole said. You were betrayed by someone positioned specifically to betray you. Those aren't the same thing. She looked at him. The people who are idiots, Cole said, are the ones who get betrayed and decide the lesson is not to trust anyone. That's the stupid move. He picked up his coffee. The correct move is to be more careful about who gets access, not to close the door. She looked at him for a long moment. Is that what you did? She said. After whatever happened to you, you closed the door. Yeah, he said. And now? Cole looked at the sitting room, at the two girls on the couch, at Lily's hand, visible above the blanket edge, curled in the way that children's hands curl in sleep, instinctive, small, unconsciously trusting the world to still be there when the hand opens again. He put his hand in his inside jacket pocket, took out the DNA kit, set it on the counter between them. Vivian looked at it. I've been thinking, Cole said, about what the result means. Either way. And? If she's mine, biologically, then I missed 5 years. That's on me. Not on you, not on circumstance. I left before you woke up because that's what I did then. I was a different person and I was wrong, and those 5 years happened the way they happened, and I can't get them back. Vivian said nothing. She was listening with her whole face. If she's not mine, Cole said, then I found out she might be, and I came back, and I held her in a storm, and I was in this house last night. He paused. That's also true. What are you saying? I'm saying the test matters. I want to know. I need to know. He looked at her directly. But it's not the only thing that matters, and I don't want you to think that what I do next depends entirely on a number. Vivian was quiet for a long moment. Cole, she said, I spent 5 years telling myself I didn't need to find you, that I'd handled it, that the girls were fine and I was fine, and the story had a shape that made sense without you in it. She turned the DNA kit in her hands, and then Lily looked at a man on a motorcycle in the rain and said what she said, and I realized I had been telling myself a story. She set the kit down. The test matters, but you're right that it's not the only thing. He held out his hand. She looked at it. Then she placed the kit in it. They did the test in the kitchen at 6:15 in the morning, with the coffee getting cold and the investigator still working in the study, and the Brotherhood keeping watch in the gray pre-dawn outside. It took 4 minutes. The kit was the kind that gave a preliminary result, not court admissible, not the kind either of them would rely on for legal proceedings, but the kind that answered the private question, the one that had been living in the space between them since a rainy intersection and a pink umbrella 3 nights ago. They waited together. At 6:19, Lily padded into the kitchen in her socks. One on, one off fob. The same configuration as Mara on the stairs 2 nights ago, which might have been coincidence and might have been something inherited, and looked at the 2 adults at the kitchen island with the complete unself-consciousness of a 5-year-old who sees the world exactly as it presents itself. "Is there cereal?" she said. "Yeah," Cole said. "What kind do you want?" "The one with the stars." He got up and found it in the 3rd cabinet he checked, because he was learning the geography of this kitchen the way you learn anything unfamiliar, by moving through it until it became known. He poured a bowl, found the milk, set it in front of her. Lily climbed onto the stool and began to eat with the focused seriousness of a child for whom breakfast is a matter of significant personal priority. Cole sat back down. He looked at Vivian. She looked at him. The result was in both their hands. They had each looked at it. They had not yet spoken about what it said, because Lily was eating cereal 3 feet away, and some conversations belonged to a different moment. But Vivian's eyes, meeting his across the kitchen island in the growing morning light, told him everything he needed to know about what the result was before either of them found the words for it. He looked at Lily. She looked up from her bowl and found him looking and looked back with the absolute directness of a child who has already decided something and does not intend to undecide it. "You stayed," she said. Matter of fact. Reporting a fact. "Yeah," Cole said. She went back to her cereal. Outside at 6:58, Garrett Wells was taken into custody at his residence in the Northern District by Marsh's team and 2 officers from the county sheriff's department, the latter having been contacted by Calloway's office at 5 a.m. with documentation sufficient to establish probable cause on 8 separate counts. The arrest was quiet, no spectacle, no press, no drama. A man in a bathrobe in a doorway, and then a man in custody, which was the most accurate summary of how power actually moved when the people it had been moving against stopped being alone. Cole heard about it from Marsh at 7:15. She came to the kitchen doorway and said, "It's done," and then went back to finishing her work. He sat with that for a moment. It's done. 3 years of Danny. 8 months of Wells pressing Vivian toward a wall. 1 rainy night and a pink umbrella and a stuffed rabbit with 1 button eye. A table built from salvage oak and the brotherhood that had sat around it when Cole wasn't there and had kept the faith that he would come back. Done. He went outside. The morning had arrived while he wasn't watching. Not dramatically, not with any announcement, just the ordinary miracle of the sun clearing the horizon and the world resolving from gray to color, wet grass going green in the early light, the iron gate throwing its shadow long across the gravel drive. The rain was finished. The air was cold and clean, with the specific cleanness that follows a long storm. Priest was leaning against the south garden wall with his arms crossed and a cigarette burned down to the filter. He looked at Cole when Cole came out and nodded once without moving anything else. Dex was at the gate. He'd been there since 4 in the morning, the youngest of them, 26 years old, a face that still registered the world's cruelties with the faint surprise of someone not yet entirely accustomed to them, though the accommodation was happening. Vance and Caldwell were in the drive, sitting on the hoods of their bikes, talking quietly about something that made Caldwell gesture with his coffee cup, and Vance shake his head. Rook was sitting on the front steps with his back against the stone pillar and his left hand pressed to his side and his eyes closed, not sleeping, Cole could tell from his breathing, but resting in the specific way of someone who has been wounded and is performing the disciplined accounting of the body that determines what comes next. Cole sat beside him. Rook opened one eye. "How bad?" Cole said, for the second time that night. 2 stitches, Rook said. "Maybe 3. He paused. "I've had worse shaving." Cole said nothing for a moment. "Thank you," he said. Rook closed the eye again. "Don't thank me for doing what made sense to do." I'm thanking you anyway. A beat of silence. The kid, Rook said. Lily. He didn't open his eyes. She's yours? Cole looked at the wet gravel, at the morning light on it. Yeah, he said. Rook made a sound that was the minimal possible expression of something larger. Good, he said. Marcus came out of this front door at 7:30 with 2 coffees and handed one to Cole and sat on the step below him and stretched his legs out and looked at the morning the way men look at mornings they weren't certain they'd be around for. Harlan's going to want a debrief, Marcus said. Harlan can have one. Not today. Definitely not today. They drank their coffee. A bird somewhere in the garden made an announcement about the end of the storm that nobody had asked for and was correct about. You know what you're doing, Marcus said. Not a question. Not a statement. The particular inflection that exists between them. No, Cole said. I know what I'm starting. That's different. Yeah, Marcus said. It is. Harlan came out at 7:45. He stood in the doorway for a moment, looking at the drive, at the men, at the morning. He had the folder with Danny's photograph under his arm. He walked down the steps and held it out to Cole. Cole took it, looked at the photograph on top. Danny, laughing, alive, the shop behind him, the oak table in the background. He held it for a moment. Then he opened the folder and looked at the payment records, the mechanic's name, the dates, the careful, distant architecture of a decision that had cost his brother his life and cost Cole 3 years of guilt that had never been his to carry. He looked at it until he had looked at it enough. He closed the folder. I want to do something for him, Cole said. For Danny. When this is over. When Wells is processed and the case is built and his name is on the record the way it should be. He looked at Harlan. I want to do something that puts his name on something real. Harlan looked at him steadily. What did you have in mind? I don't know yet, Cole said. But I want the Brotherhood to be part of it. Harlan looked at him for a long moment. The morning light on his face showed every year and every mile. Then he said, Ed, you're back at the table. Yeah, Cole said. Full seat. Full seat. Harlan nodded once. He turned and walked back up the steps and went inside because Harlan Cade expressed things by moving through them rather than around them, and what had just been said was sufficient. At 8:30, the investigators finished and began packing their equipment. Marsh came to find Cole before she left. She stood in the drive with her tablet and the morning behind her and looked at him with the look she'd been using professionally for 14 years. The one that communicated that she had seen what she'd seen and formed the conclusion she'd formed and was not available for renegotiation. The Brotherhood's involvement tonight, she said. I saw what I saw. I'm going to describe it, if I need to describe it at all, as concerned community members who provided perimeter security at the property owner's request. Cole looked at her. The documentation your people compiled, she said, is going to be the center of this case, not how it was obtained. How it was obtained is going to be a question nobody needs answered if the case is built correctly. She paused. I intend to build it correctly. I know you do, Cole said. She looked at him for one more second with something that was not quite warmth but was adjacent to it. The specific expression of a person who has worked long enough in the space between how things are supposed to work and how they do that, they have learned to recognize the moments when the gap closes, even briefly. She left. The Brotherhood dispersed in pairs, the way they always moved. Not ceremonially, not with speeches, just the organic redistribution of men who had come together for a purpose and were now carrying that purpose in different directions. Dex last. He stood at the gate for a moment, looking back at the house, at Cole on the steps, with the expression of a 26-year-old who has spent a long night learning something about what the Brotherhood was actually built for and is integrating it. Cole met his eyes. Dex nodded. Went. Only Marcus stayed. He stayed because nobody told him to leave and he didn't require an invitation, and Cole didn't offer one, which was the nature of the relationship. 20 years of the specific shorthand that develops between people who have moved through enough difficulty together to have stopped needing to announce their intentions. Vivian came out at 9. The girls were with her, both awake now. Mara in a jacket, Lily still in pajamas with Cole's enormous iron shepherd jacket pulled over them, which she had apparently retrieved from wherever Vivian had hung it to dry, and which she was wearing with the total satisfaction of someone who has claimed a territory. They stood on the front steps in the morning. The drive was empty now. The gate was closed. The limestone house behind them had the particular stillness of a place that has been through something and is still standing, which is its own kind of statement. Lily looked at Cole. "Are you going to go away?" she said. Cole looked at this child, at the jacket she was wearing, at the one-eyed rabbit tucked in the crook of her arm. "No," he said. She accepted this the way she accepted most information that confirmed what she already believed, without fanfare, with a small nod, and then an immediate return to the next practical concern. "Can we get breakfast somewhere?" she said. "Not cereal, real breakfast." Marcus made a sound that was, this time, unmistakably a suppressed laugh. Vivian looked at Cole. Cole looked at Marcus. "You know a place?" Cole said. "Diner on Route 6, Marcus said. "Opens at 6. They're going to have been open for 3 hours by the time we get there." "They have pancakes?" Lily asked. Directly to Marcus, whom she had apparently accepted as a relevant authority on the subject. "They have the best pancakes in the county," Marcus said, with the gravity of a man making a statement he intends to stand behind. Lily looked at her mother. Vivian looked at Cole. Cole stood. He walked to the Harley, ran his hand along the tank, the familiar cold of the metal, the specific texture of it, the slight roughness where a stone had caught the finish 2 years ago, and he'd never refinished because it was just a bike. And bikes were supposed to carry their history on their skin. He'd rebuilt this machine twice. He knew every bolt, every wire, every inch of its character, the way you know a thing you've put your hands through repeatedly in the dark. He looked at Lily. "You remember how to hold on?" he said. She was already coming down the steps. Vivian watched from the doorway as Cole got the Harley running and settled Lily in front of him, her small hands on the tank, Cole's arm around her, the iron shepherd jacket enormous around her like something built for a larger version of herself she was growing toward. Mara stood beside her mother, watching. "You're going to ride separately?" Mara said to her mother, the tone of a child evaluating logistics. "We'll take the car," Vivian said. "Can I ride next time?" Mara asked. Vivian looked at Cole. Cole looked at Mara. "Next time," he said. "I'll teach you how to lean with the curve." Mara considered this with the gravity it deserved. "Okay," she said, and went to get her shoes. They rode to the diner on Route 6 in the thin October morning. The Harley and the car, the road still wet from the storm, and the light coming in low from the east, and the world doing what the world does after a long cold night, resuming itself, ordinary and essential, and completely indifferent to the difficulty that preceded it, which was the correct response. The diner was warm and smelled of coffee and butter, and the specific combination of breakfast things that exists nowhere else, and is immediately recognizable as the smell of a place that has been feeding people through their mornings for decades, without pretension or interruption. A woman with gray hair and the competent movement of someone who had worked this floor for 20 years brought a menu without being asked, and coffee without being requested, and set it all down and looked at the group, Cole, Marcus, Vivian, 2 girls in various states of outerwear, including one very small person in a motorcycle jacket, with the complete equanimity of a person who had seen every configuration of family that existed and had long since stopped requiring them to explain themselves. They sat in a corner booth, Marcus across from Vivian, the girls between them, Lily pressed against Cole's side with the unself-conscious claiming of territory that children perform when they have decided something is theirs. Cole held the menu. He hadn't eaten since yesterday. He became aware of this in the particular way you become aware of physical needs that have been deferred by adrenaline, all at once, total, the body presenting its bill. He ordered eggs, toast, coffee, the basics because his body wanted the basics. Lily ordered pancakes, with strawberries, and syrup that Marcus confirmed was real maple. The food came. The booth was warm. The coffee was the industrial diner kind that was exactly what it was and made no apologies. Outside, Route 6 moved through its morning. Trucks, cars, the ordinary traffic of people with nowhere extraordinary to be, doing the essential work of continuance. Cole ate. He looked at the table, at Marcus cutting his eggs with the focused attention of a man who applies thoroughness to everything he does, at Vivian with her coffee and her hands around it, and the particular quality of her stillness now, different from the controlled stillness of the woman he'd met in a doorway 3 nights ago. This stillness had something underneath it that the other hadn't. The specific rest of a person who has been holding something heavy alone for a very long time and has, for the first time, set it down. At Lily beside him, working through her pancakes with the devotion of someone engaged in meaningful work. At Mara across the booth, eating with one eye on the window, watching the morning traffic with the measuring attention she brought to everything. 8 years old and already a student of the world, cataloging it, filing it, building the picture. She caught him looking. She looked back. "Are you going to live with us?" she asked. Direct. No preamble. The question of a child who has decided that the adults around her have been having a conversation that directly concerns her for long enough. The booth was quiet. Cole looked at Vivian. She looked at him with the expression of a woman who would not answer this question on his behalf, who understood that the answer was his to give and that she would not diminish it by softening it or framing it or protecting him from the requirement to be direct. He looked at Mara. "No," he said. "Not yet. I have an apartment, a shop, things I need to sort." He paused. "But I'm going to be around every day if that works for your mom. I'm going to fix the gate hinge that's been loose. I noticed it on the way out the first night. I'm going to be at the table for dinner when you'll have me. I'm going to be the person you call if something needs handling." He looked at her steadily. "And I'm not going to disappear. That one I can promise without conditions." Mara received this. She ate a piece of toast. "The gate hinge has been broken for 6 months," she said. "Mom keeps meaning to call someone." "I'll do it Thursday," Cole said. "Okay," Mara said, and went back to her breakfast with the satisfaction of someone who has obtained a commitment from a reliable source. Cole felt something in his chest. Not the sharp thing, not the weight he'd been carrying, but something different, something that didn't have a name that he was ready to use yet, but that felt like the very beginning of the opposite of what he'd been living in. The check came. Marcus took it before Cole could reach it and paid it with the quiet finality of a man performing an act of care through a practical gesture, which was how Marcus had always expressed most things. They went outside into the morning. Cole stood at the Harley. Lily was already positioned beside it, clearly expecting to ride back. Vivian came to stand beside Cole while Marcus took the girls around to the car. She was not quite touching him, a foot of autumn air between them, and she was looking at the road with the look she had when she was thinking something that she was deciding whether to say. "The test result," she said. "Yeah. We should do the official one, the admissible one." "I know." "For the legal process. For Wells's case, possibly. And for—" She paused. "For her. When she's old enough to ask questions and needs answers that are on record." "Set it up," Cole said. "I'll be there." She looked at him then. Directly, the way she had from the first doorway. No flinch, no performance. The specific steadiness of a person who has decided that the cost of being seen is lower than the cost of remaining hidden. "Cole," she said, "the morning you came back with the rabbit. Before any of this. Before you knew about Wells or Hoyle or any of it." She paused. "Why did you come back?" "The real reason." He looked at the road. A truck went past. A woman walked a dog on the far sidewalk. The Route 6 morning, indifferent and continuous. "Because she trusted me with the most important thing she had," he said. "And I wasn't ready to be someone who held that and then disappeared." Vivian was quiet for a moment. "That's enough," she said. "That's enough to start with." He looked at her. She looked back. The space between them was still a foot of autumn air, but it was different air than it had been 3 nights ago. Warmer, the specific warmth of 2 people who have been through a storm together and are standing on the other side of it in the morning, assessing the damage, finding the structure standing. Lily called from the car, "Cole, are we going?" He looked at her, then at Vivian. He put on his helmet, the one he'd grabbed by instinct the morning after the rain, some returning self-preservation that he now understood had not been about himself, and swung a leg over the Harley. He started the engine. The sound of it rolled out across the Route 6 morning, unmistakable, the low, specific growl of a machine that knew what it was. Not a weapon, not an escape, just an engine, doing the thing an engine does. He rode, not away from anything. Home was not a fixed address yet. He didn't know the full shape of it. He knew it included a loose gate hinge on Ashwood Drive and a booth at a diner on Route 6 and a table built from salvage oak in the back of a shop on Delman Street, and the men who sat around it, wounded and present, holding lines they chose to hold. He knew it included a 5-year-old who wore his jacket and trusted him with her rabbit, and called him back from 11 seconds of wrong decision with 2 words through the rain. He knew it included a woman who had poured his coffee black before he asked, who had fought alone for 2 years without folding, and who had looked at him across a kitchen in the worst night of her life and handed him a sleeping child without needing to explain why. He knew it included the weight of Danny, which he would carry differently now, not as guilt, not as the verdict of his own hands, but as the specific, irreplaceable weight of someone loved and gone and worth remembering correctly. Cole Rourke rode north on Route 6 in the October morning with the road clean and wet and the sun coming in low and gold across everything. And for the first time in longer than he could accurately account for, the road ahead of him was not empty. It was full. Full of the particular impossible weight of things worth staying for. He didn't outrun it. He rode toward it. And the engine, which had been speaking in the language of escape for 6 years, finally found a different word for what it was doing. It was the sound of a man